This is William Tincup, and you are listening and hopefully watching the Use Case Podcast. Ryan, how you doing today?
I'm good. I thought you were going to skip over my intro again.
No, I'm not going to because there might be some fishing stories that we get to later. But
Larry,
anyhow,
he does this sometimes. He forgets that I exist. He's
that's not
like my
true.
wife, just
It's not
forgets
true.
that I'm
It's
here.
absolutely not true. Larry, obviously you're on the Use Case Podcast. We want to talk a lot about your technology. But before we do that, why don't you introduce yourself to us?
Sure. I am Larry Neal. I'm the CEO of Cisive, a role that I took on about a year and a half ago. And it's sort of nearing the end of my career more than the beginning. And it's been a very exciting opportunity to pull together many things I've done in my career. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. But I come from outside the background screening space and really even broadly the HR space. But bring lots of experience in other areas. So I'm always excited to work in a new business where I can, use some of the cool things we did elsewhere and do them here. So, and I'm sure we'll dig into that for sure. I'm sure.
Yeah, I think Larry, we see so many people. A lot of I was joking about this in pre-show where I had said if we describe something or talk about something and we attach innovation
Hmm.
to the person, they generally come from outside
Yeah.
Yeah.
of our space, and that's not knocking
Yeah.
No.
our space, right? It's just you're in the space, you've been here forever, and it's hard to innovate something that you've been in for so long. Where did you come from? What was your background prior to getting in, and what
Yeah.
drove you to getting
Yeah.
into this space?
If we go all the way back, I was an engineer by schooling, and I was a mechanical engineer, and my father was a nuclear engineer, so that felt like the path for life for me. But
Right.
I did that for a couple of years, but loved the analytical side, but really wanted to be more in a business and sort of dynamic area. So I shifted into sales from engineering and gravitated then toward financial information, financial data, and I'd say right at that point, the career path that I went down was what I would call vertical applications and often
Hmm.
workflow oriented tools for vertical applications that had a heavy data component to them. Either data as a critical part of that particular workflow, or even more interestingly, data that was sort of a byproduct of that work, but was tremendously valuable to utilize to understand all kinds of things and so forth. Right. So that was really kind of what I locked into, was these vertically focused businesses that were heavy workflow tech and
Hmm.
heavy data. So that's kind of, and I described half my career was sort of in sales leadership and commercial roles, and then half the last 20 years probably in just running different businesses,
Right.
CEO, president, different business. So had a chance to see a lot of different ones. Um,
I
so
love that. I love that. Well, you're sitting on top of, especially the company that you have now. You're sitting on top of a lot of data. Tell us a little bit more about Cisive. What's going on with Cisive these
yeah,
days?
so and it probably connects to what drew me to Cisive, right? And I think kind of first and foremost, maybe not just even Cisive, but as an industry, I looked at it as it's an incredibly important function that companies like Cisive provide, and there's a lot of value in doing it. And I'd say increasingly, it's important to do it better and better. Probably for all the obvious reasons, right? But what I did see was untapped opportunities in certain areas, right? And the foundation of that to me was kind of re-envisioning the role of a background screener as they're typically defined, which is kind of heavily oriented toward the hiring process and
Right.
vetting,
Pre-employment.
right,
Yeah.
pre-hire. But when you look at the broader sort of area we operate within the customer's organization and what they're doing, right? Their needs go certainly well beyond that, and really we see it more as we're helping customers manage their workforces, the risks associated with those, with any workforce, the requirements to meet obligations if they're regulatory or right. So we're kind of stepping back and seeing where does a customer have needs that fit where we could sort of perform well, and that's really what drew me in. we're very vertically focused at Cisive,
Hmm.
so this strategy is almost inherent in who we already are, right? Because our
Right.
main verticals are healthcare, transportation, largely commercial trucking, but not, limited to, and financial services. And, characteristically, each of those has unique requirements, unique landscape of, again, like, so rules they have to comply with, right? And unique needs. And so that's where we feel that the strategy we're undertaking to have that broader role is also very well aligned with being focused by vertical, right? Because we're building and we have the knowledge and expertise of what customers are doing in those spaces, so we're in a good position to then work collaboratively with customers to achieve those things, right? And I would contrast it with sort of another aspect of the market, the big guys, right, that are try to be very broad based, right, try to provide in scale very large rounded capabilities, and I have nothing bad to say about that. That's a need as well, right? So it's not it's not like one's right, one's wrong. It's just to me reflective of the diversity of the landscape in the market, right, and what
No.
these different customers
So,
require.
Larry, question here on problem solving.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, we know what you do, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty straightforward. But when a company is looking, what's the problem that a company is truly looking to solve? Maybe not on the surface, but a couple of layers deep. What is that? What is the leadership of that company trying to solve when they
Yeah.
reach out to Cisive?
Yeah, I think it's a few things, right? I'd say, kind of on the surface, it's for us to perform our role well and to catch, any, candidate that they intend to hire and they find out is either, maybe not all what they thought or there's an issue in the past, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's validating that the candidate that they're, want to hire is the right candidate, and is there's no sort of surprises in their background that are problematic, right? So that's sort of kind of the main element I'd say. But when you look at the broader need, right, that's a necessity, kind of not an objective, right? The objective is to build a talented workforce, right? To be able to source, the candidates you need to be able to hire them over your competitors if it's an area where there's high demand for candidates, right? So that's when things like speed matter, how quickly we can turn things around for our customer and for that candidate, because when it is competitive, those things matter, right? I think, the experience that the candidate has and the customer also matter. I'd say more and more, the candidate experience is important because, again, it's a reflection of the company that's hiring them, what that experience is like, right? It's also, and it increasingly we live in a world where if you use tech and it isn't easy to use or it's bad, it creates a bad impression, very broadly, right? I think we all are, I guess, well, I'll only speak for myself, but when you come across something that doesn't work very well or feels dated, it doesn't leave you with a good impression of what, sort of the rest of what that's about, right? So we're very conscious of, and I would say Cisive has, work to do there. Right? We're not, that's one of the areas where we need to really kind of refresh, and we are, right? So it's really kind of looking at the aspects of what we do that impact them maybe in other ways that aren't as sort of maybe obvious, right?
Right.
Is sort of how I would.
What it's interesting, Larry, the customers almost also has changed their needs over the years where that at a
Yeah.
point they just needed background checks before employment to make sure you mentioned risk management before. They just needed it was a checkbox. They
Yep.
needed to make sure, okay, run
No.
a screen, make sure this person
Exactly.
isn't a murderer.
Yeah.
Done.
Did they kill anybody? We good.
Did they kill anybody?
Exactly.
Now you can see the customers changing and the practitioners changing in their needs in terms of we want monitoring. We need to know, okay,
Exactly.
Brad wasn't a murderer
Yep.
before we hired him, but you know
Now he
what?
is.
Yeah,
Yep.
3 months into his tenure,
Yep.
he's picked up or whatever. So you can kind of see them wanting more of a kind of a SaaS based model or a
Yes.
model that says, you know what, we need to do the pre employment stuff, but we also need to do this. And you also see especially now with AI and Gen AI, you see them desiring verification.
Yep.
So one's okay, is this person, a criminal? Okay, we can go and search databases and make sure they're not a criminal. Okay, fine. But is that person that person?
Yes. Yep. Yeah,
That's we've seen practitioners. So tell us a little bit about
yeah,
what you're
really
seeing
great.
from customers.
Yeah, really great points and very central to what we're focused on in our strategy. Before I sort of jump to that, I just want to comment your point about needs changing. Is even within an existing customer, I've seen needs change, right? And
Right.
if you look at how background screening, kind of what it is, right? It's not a perfect sort of black and white answer to something, right? For first, right? Everybody's doing the best they can, right? The other is the interpretation of what's found is also not very black and white. I'll just give one example. Was we have a particular customer that the individual with responsibility for the hiring area emphasized verification of employment, even if it was at a franchise, as a independently owned McDonald's or something, right? As very critical because it was the way they gauged candidate integrity. If the candidate
Oh, interesting.
misrepresented any of their employment, they viewed that as an insight into integrity. So for them, right, that
Wow.
was important. I could say for other customers, they go, I don't care if they were, right?
They
But
were working?
yeah,
Done.
right. And our view is there's no right answer there. That's
Right.
for them, right? So, but and then so to your point about the broader need, what you described is exactly what we see and are doing, which is it's great to vet an individual when they're hired, but that's not the end of the potential, risk or issue with an employee because things can happen post hiring, obviously, right? So we're doing a lot of work in that area. We in healthcare we have a product called License Manager Pro, which tracks all of the licenses that are required by individuals that are required to be licensed in healthcare and ensures that they're up to date, that they're compliant, that there's no issues. So we're looking at a series of sort of post-hire services that really would
Right.
just like this. Obviously, ongoing criminal monitoring is one that's quite important and also quite nuanced, right?
Right.
How any employer views, an arrest or some
Right.
traffic violation even, or DUI, things is all very different as well. But what they do want is they do want to be able to monitor it and know about that, right? So we are doing quite a bit of work in those areas to collaborate with customers on what the needs are there, and that first defines our working with customers to where we can expand the capabilities that we have to meet the broader set of needs that they're that are driving their businesses that are important to them these days.
Larry, what are we looking at here in terms of company, type of company that you're working? We don't understand the vertical, but are you looking at the complexity of their hiring process? Is it
Yeah,
just the sheer number of employees? What makes them a great fit for
yeah,
CISA?
no, and I think you hit on a couple of the core elements, right? We are best when those needs are specialized, specialized for the industry. Healthcare
Right.
is an example of that,
Hmm.
but also specialized for that particular customer, right? And I'll give an example of that as well. One of the ways we are, really kind of integrate tightly with customers is around, workflow integration of our capabilities into their processes, rather than it being sort of this experience where they
Oh, cool.
step outside of what they're doing, they run
Right.
the background check, and then okay, we have it, and they put it back in, right?
Mm.
One of our largest customers literally hires 500 people a day, which still blows my mind to the volume of people.
500 a day?
So you think about
Jesus.
what does it take to do that, right? Yeah,
Wow.
they run a
A lot of Coca-Cola.
Ryan just had a heart attack. Okay, we're back now.
wrapping my head around what it's
I'm a little
like.
tired right now.
My God, but the recruiting funnel on that is insane.
And it's a it's kind of not to belittle, but it has to be a factory, right?
Yeah.
Because
Here's what's happening right now. Everybody who's in this space, Larry, that's
Yes.
listening to this show, or
Is
will see it on LinkedIn, is they are thinking who is this company hiring 500 because I need to get to their team so I can sell
Yeah,
my product to them.
that's,
They're
Think
going to be
about
digging into this potential.
think about that. If to hire, how many people did you have to
exactly.
interview?
Yeah,
How many people did you have to source? Like,
Forget it.
oh my God.
it's insane.
Anyhow,
Forget
go ahead.
about it.
Tell us more about it.
So yeah, so as you can imagine, they have to run a very rigorous, disciplined process, and
Right.
so it's an example of we integrate our workflow with a lot of our large customers. I'd say most, just to make the whole process easier, right?
Right.
Like to leave and go off for it. In this particular case, with the targets that they're after, they have, one part of it is like they have checkpoints at different points during the week. And I'm making up the times,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
by Wednesday at 5 o'clock, we have to be 80% complete through that week's batch of candidates, right? So they're monitoring progression through
Right.
it, and we have
Yeah.
targets we're hitting because
Yeah.
the follow-on is, as you can imagine, right? I've got to do orientation. I'm going to do all the follow-on
That's right.
setup. The manager
Yeah.
that's giving us
You
know
can't be
what
a choke point at
person
that point.
exactly.
You've got the through point. You
Yeah,
they might slow down, and they might want to slow down, but they can't
we
slow down
can't. Yeah,
because
No.
yeah.
yeah.
You are
Yeah.
the conveyor belt
And if,
machine.
which, times obviously
Uh,
things happen that slow things down, they can manage that if they know,
right.
right? So that's where this, particular element of really tightly managing kind of the flow and the throughput matters because of all the follow-on implications of, well, I thought this guy was going to start on Monday, now it's going to be a week from now. There's a lot to manage beyond, finding and hiring 500 is enough. Assimilating them into your organization is also a whole nother, right?
That's a
So,
yes. That's another headache, but let's not
yes.
deal with that headache.
But that's
Larry, I got
that's where we see, sorry, our larger role, having, really good context for the customer, where, by knowing we can work together to achieve that, not,
right.
that's sort of how we think about
The
it.
more you're integrated into their workflow, the better for them, the
Yeah,
easier for them.
exactly.
Two questions, and they're completely different, but I want to kind of gauge what customers are asking you. One is about remote hiring,
Yeah.
and so the complexities around screening in a remote environment. And the other is there was a period, probably a decade ago, where recruiters cared deeply about social.
Yeah.
There was a period where they were like, okay, I want to know about their Facebook. I want to know what they've done, on Instagram, Twitter, and all that other stuff.
Yeah.
So two vastly different
Yeah.
questions, but really what I'm trying to get a feel for is what the customers are kind of asking for these days.
Yeah, and I'll throw another one in too. So you look at the marijuana legalization,
Yeah,
too, where
point taken.
another one that's, it's a dynamic that doesn't have a straightforward answer to it, right?
Nope.
And social is a similar one. But I think there's obviously a desire to, feel more confident that you understand the person you're hiring, right?
Right.
That's kind of, without a doubt. So, and the remote work angle has introduced some additional, right, dimensions to that. One, we kind of, I don't know, I guess the industry may call it this too, is quote unquote overemployment, which means
Right.
I have 2 jobs, right? We actually came across someone who had 3 jobs and had a team of 4 people in India. He was a developer in India doing the work. So he was, you gotta give a star for creativity there.
That is an entrepreneur right there. All right.
But not all bad. So, right?
Not all bad, but yeah,
But that's an example of, that it happened occasionally in the past,
yeah.
but it's also much more prevalent now, right? So that's an example of sort of the remote work dimension. On the social side, it's challenging. I'd say, my observation of it is that in its early days, it was a bit more maybe problematic due to the how do I interpret this? How do I think about this? Someone's views, maybe that whatever it may be, right? I think the issue now is, or maybe issue, the dynamic now is that, as generational shifts occur, well, in the younger generations I work with, everybody's got social. It's not a one-off anymore. And it's also not unusual for that social presence to maybe emphasize certain aspects of things that may be sort of okay or not okay, or desirable and not desirable. But it's a very challenging area, but I think there's a greater acceptance that of understanding what is that problematic or not. I mean, it's so prevalent now that I think there's a
Right.
greater comfort for, hey, everybody's got a life and a persona, and it may be different outside of work than it is inside, and I need to come to grips with that, right, or be comfortable
Well,
with that.
No.
COVID made us all relax a little bit
Yeah,
in a sense of it stressed us all out, but it
Hmm.
aged us. But it also like seeing cats and kids and
It's
all that
humanized
normalized.
a little
stuff.
bit more. Yeah, I think it humanized us, right?
It
Yeah.
did.
In a good
It
way,
did.
Yeah.
I think.
Yep.
Right? Yeah, and that's always my view too. Is people have a life, and you want to, and
Yeah.
the job's not their
Yeah.
life.
I don't know. I don't know. I still don't know how I would take an employer joining a Facebook group just to see the group that I'm in.
Yeah,
Like that's a private group, right?
it
Like
wouldn't
I've
feel.
heard stories like this before where recruiters are following people and then
Yep.
they're not, this is obviously not using software. So
Yeah.
none of this is probably sanctioned by their company. We'll just go
Right.
there. But I saw what Ryan's part of these four groups. I'm gonna go join these groups, and I'm gonna. That I'm not sure I'm a fan of that.
Yeah. Same here.
Yeah, technology managing the process, looking. I get it, right? We need to understand. Larry, question I've got here: where do you find that most companies are spending their brain power on this? Is it monitoring post hire? Or is it the initial go at it? I know they're doing both, but where are they really putting their brain power towards it?
Yeah, a great question, and I'd say the diligence and of the pre-hire continues to increase. I think in importance, right? Because the risks are higher,
Right.
the
Hmm.
uncertainties and the challenge of identifying them is just always gets harder, right? So that I think continues to sort of elevate in importance, just as we evolve as a as sort of a human race. um, the post hire is, I would say, very much an unmet need at this point, where the need and the desire to have a better handle on the things that could happen after I've employed somebody in my workforce, right? I think is very much an unmet need. I mean, we're so we think there's a lot of room
Right.
for it, and the capabilities that really haven't been there yet. That background screeners can provide the optimal solutions to some of these things. So I think that's a big area of development for us. But that's how I would. I don't think it's any less important. I think it's just less of a met need. And my instinct is that as that need starts to get met, it will then continue to evolve in its sort of sophistication
Hmm.
because the benefits are sizable, right? The benefit or the damage of something bad happening to
Right.
right a company is it can be monumental, right? It can be just really game changing for a business when some horrific incident happens, for example, right? So the vigilance and I think there's good recognition of that
Yeah.
now, right? We live in a world where something goes wrong, the world knows.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's on
Is a
Twitter.
lot of this, do you think a lot of this is driven by the fear of retaliation or the fear of the PR nightmare?
Well, I think
Or
it's money.
I think it's
I,
well,
I,
well, yeah, money, right. And it all comes down to,
hey,
right? Is it
fear
the
of $100
fear?
million lawsuit.
Right. That's where I was going with that. Is that what's driving this post hire?
Yeah, I think it's kind of all, in many ways, all of the above, right? Especially if you contrast it to what might have been before, right? There was
Right.
Yeah.
a time where these things probably wouldn't get talked about, written
No,
about,
you didn't know. The
you
Yeah.
tree
didn't know.
fell in the forest. Yeah.
So now we live in a world where everybody knows, and
That's
then
right.
you also get a
Yeah.
lot of opinions about it, right?
Yeah.
Right.
People are happy to kind of Monday morning quarterback something, and before
Hmm.
they didn't stop something from
So
happening. That's right. And then the
here's
liability is also you.
here's a random for the conversation question, but not random because I was having this conversation the other day. So as you're, I'm not sure how you're where you guys are based and how it's set up. If we drive over a bridge especially from Philly into Jersey. It is billboard after billboard after billboard after billboard with or into the city of injury law firms
Yeah.
and things like that. It is just plastered everywhere for whatever reason. Okay, it's plastered. So the guy that I was with, we were having a conversation, and I don't know how this came up, but it came up because of the billboards. I don't know why my mind went here. Probably because I spend my life here talking about things like this that are not interesting to people who don't care about this. Um, but as you're talking, Larry, this is what triggered in my mind. Are you monitoring, or in theory, could this be monitored where William has five lawsuits over the past, we hired him to, 3 years
Yep.
ago. He's got five lawsuits for injuries elsewhere or
Yeah.
whatever. We need to be concerned about William and monitor him here. He may be
Yes.
ready to,
Yeah.
It's
bring
not
a
a
suit towards us.
it's not a protected class, right?
Yeah.
So as long as it's not a protected, excuse me, I'm not the expert. However, I play one on TV. As long as it's not a protected class, if someone's had five lawsuits
Yeah.
in there before,
Huh?
but you can screen them in or screen them
Oh
out.
yeah.
That's
Well, yeah. That's what I'm saying. Like, so as they're hired, though, right? Is that
uh-huh.
something employees or employers are monitoring?
As long as they have, it's
Good
something I would
question.
say that's where the unmet need exists. The answer is
Right.
yes,
Mm-hmm.
but not to the full extent that they
Right.
would like to, right?
Yeah.
But you're hitting on, I think, another key point, right, which goes back to sort of the $100 million lawsuit point, because
Right.
that's the other reality that
Yeah.
companies face is the lawsuits are big, right? There's plenty of individuals out there to be happy to pursue them. And the liabilities are in several places, right? The
Right.
individual also, I think, we all have a maybe more self-awareness and self-importance of our own protection of our information, what's right and not right, sort of, right? So the employees have to navigate that they do these things in a fair and proper way as well, so that they don't expose themselves to, inadvertently to a liability associated from the employee themselves, right?
Mm-hmm.
For, them running afoul of some of theirs. It's sort of this overall heightened, complex, world of both reputational and real, sort of legal monetary risk that everyone, has to navigate. And
Well, that
increasingly privacy protections, right? Like, look at some of the stuff coming out of
and
California, right? There's a very strong orientation toward protecting the liberties of residents in California, and that does
hmm
put onus on employers to adhere to more, right, obligations that reflect that, right? So they're all, they can be done, but you have to do them, right? They're real obligations, and
well,
they're
in the regulated industries that you deal with, it can be expose them to such a risk if the truck driver hasn't renewed their driver's license or their license,
right.
or a nurse hasn't renewed their, or a financial services person hasn't renewed their. So I mean, there's risk associated just with them not renewing things.
Yeah, there is.
My question is, and in educating the practitioners, this isn't a perfect science.
Right.
It's never been a perfect
Never.
science,
Yeah.
and it will probably never be a perfect science. We will pursue that goal. However, when you talk to clients, how hmm, how much do they know of that not being a perfect science?
Yeah, that's a great point. I think it's hard to tell. Maybe part
Yeah,
of be very,
yeah,
about this because the way I describe it internally, the way I think of it is that we live on the margins in many ways.
yeah,
We're a business where
Mm-hmm.
99.9% of everything can be done, no issue. But it's the one or two,
right,
that get
right.
get through it. Look, and I respect that, right? The joke I sometimes use is, we can vet, employees, candidates for hiring, and maybe we get everybody up to this point of something percent. But then you look at it and say, that's 40 people, and if I put them all in a room together with me, it's going to feel like a lot of criminals. So, so the point being that there's validity in it, right?
Yeah,
I'm not for a second saying that, but as a result, we do tend to sort of live and operate on those margins, right?
hmm
So I think that's one important sort of aspect of your question because that's a context, right? But I do think there's a bit of a misunderstanding, and I can tell you that I had it myself when I came into this,
Yeah, yeah.
as to what was achievable, how hard some of this can be. So I think that's a never-ending dynamic in many ways
Right.
because
Yeah.
it is very, very complex.
Is there an element of trust but verify as you're talking with clients?
There is for sure, yep,
Yeah.
and it's something increasingly for ourselves. The best way I see of addressing is becoming more and more transparent, right?
Right.
Because we are confident we're going to do the best we can do, and we're always going to strive to do better, but it will be imperfect. And the more that transparency exists to customers, we believe that that's the right way to go because
Right.
it's just reality. We can't, there's no point in pretending we could be perfect or pretending we don't have any issues, right? That'd be a bit of a, fool's errand, right? So, but that's an area where we are working more. And we're doing a lot in our operational team to really capture more, really to the level of full detail of exactly what was undertaken for any one particular, sort
Right.
of case
Yeah.
that we do. It's work in progress, but the concept is to have transparency and be
Yeah.
able to really see and because at the end of the day, then there's still there's a judgment that has to also be made, right? I
We
hope.
did we do a news show, Larry, on Sundays, and recently it was last week. We
Hmm.
talked about a settlement from a screening and services company where they wrongly convicted somebody as a murder or put it
Yeah,
forward as a murderer.
Yeah.
I might have that backwards, but the company just took it for what it was and didn't verify. And so it turns out the person had the same name or something like that, but it
yeah,
was the wrong person. Um, and this happens a lot more than we actually
yeah,
believed or thought
yeah,
Right.
that it would happen, which is why I asked a question.
yeah.
Trust it, but verify.
Yeah, and I think it's potentially getting harder to do as well, right? Again, not to pick on California, but their
No,
privacy,
you can pick on California. You're good.
their,
You're in a safe space.
their privacy laws are going in a direction that protects the individual
Oh
increasingly,
yeah. That's
but
why
it
a lot of businesses are moving to
harder to
Texas.
know is the individual that if they start redacting certain personal
Right.
involved
Right.
information, that makes it hard for us to confirm we're getting the right person, right? That's you know it's how you balance those things and understand that solve one problem, but do you sort of potentially create a more challenging one to navigate. And I think that's also where the world's going. I think AI is going to probably turbocharge some of those issues because, as you can imagine, the application of AI in this environment where there's sensitivity to, you know, situations like you just described, right, not happening, and I think that also it is going to be a very challenging aspect of we navigate forward and how AI is or isn't applied to the work we do or the work any other companies like ourselves do when it comes to looking at individuals and characterizing their backgrounds or understanding their backgrounds. I think
So,
it's a challenging work.
Larry, Larry, the last question for me is it's that triangle of price, quality, and speed, right? So there's gives and takes, and a negotiation that has to happen. If you want high quality, can you get that in Can you get that in 30 seconds, right? And can you get that for pennies on the dollar, etc. So, like, how do you help both your sales team as well as you know your customer team kind of understand there's trade-offs that are made here,
Sure. Yeah.
right? So, like, what's your
Yeah.
big? Because I love that you worked in sales, so you fundamentally get this.
Yeah,
So,
no, it's a great question, right? And that qualities in the eye of the beholder, right? Also, because it has to attach to what the need is, right? So, and that's a a landscape that's also highly variable based on postures on company. We have one customer that had an incident happen. I think it was probably 20 years ago, but you would think it happened yesterday because they're
Right.
so vigilant to ensure that that never happens again, right? So they gravitate heavily toward quality. Yeah, the way but it's hard. It's not the easiest thing to define, and it's right and convey. That's where the transparency. When I emphasize, that's where transparency can help because one, you're showing here's what I'm doing. The quality is really inherent in the work I do to get to these things right. That's probably the first and best reflection of how quality might vary, right? And we're also moving to where we can start to see which aspects of the work we do drive some of these, some of these outcomes. Like what are the things we do that drives quality, and when does it sort of diminish? And kind of how deep
Right.
do we have to go? Things like that will become also more transparent to us and customers, where there'll be data to say, okay, I want quality. Here's how I think I'm achieving that, but now here's what it's resulting in. And when I did it this way, I got this. When I now do it this way, I get that, right? So it's sort of revealing the spectrum of things I can do with more insight into when they matter. I think those are really the core element. We are, known in the market as a quality provider. I think that means a few different things. In terms of what we do, we are higher priced typically. But for us, we look at it as, is that what the customer needs? If the customer, that isn't their need, we respect that. It's just not a great fit for us. There's
Right.
other providers that are fit for that. So we try to, we're shifting more toward also, should you be kind of a customer? Are we the right person for you, right? So we're really trying to be thoughtful about that and also very upfront about that, because if they just want, kind of vanilla, solid, blocking and tackling stuff, that's probably not us. And that's probably a better customer for a different provider. And again, we respect all that. That makes sense. It's not a one uniform market of need out there. So hopefully that.
Larry, this has been fantastic.
100%.
Yeah, we actually got a lot of good information in here.
Yeah.
It wasn't just about the tech, right? It was about what you guys are solving. So this is
Oh,
super
I love it.
helpful.
Yeah, no,
Great
this
show.
For
is
the
what I'm
audience.
excited about coming into this space. It's really, it's sort of, I don't know, doesn't always get the respect it deserves, maybe for
Yeah.
Right.
right?
For
But there's-
years.
Yeah.
For years, it was the redheaded
Yeah,
stepchild.
exactly.
Yeah.
And,
In
And
some
now,
ways, it still is, and it'll
yeah,
move.
I was going to say, and I'm not sure that's escaped us, but yeah, what excites me, the need is the need is there, and
uh-huh.
there, and that's kind of the exciting journey.
You either manage your risk or your risk manages you. So again, it could be the redheaded
And,
stepchild. However,
yeah, and that's not going backward. That's all
no,
Not going back.
in one
no,
direction. Yeah. So,
brother. Thank you so much for your time and
yes.
your wisdom. We really appreciate you.